Back to Action 2 News at 6. The conservative candidate running for an open seat on the Wisconsin State Supreme Court denied today that artificial intelligence was used in an ad, altering the facial expression of his liberal opponent.
That accusation now the focus of a complaint filed with the bipartisan Wisconsin Election Commission. Jason Zimmerman has both sides. He's live in our newsroom with the First Alert update. Jason.
Bill, Wisconsin law requires disclosure in AI manipulated political ads, and the complaint filed by Dane County Judge Susan Crawford is suggesting Waukesha County Judge Brad Schimel's campaign failed to do that. The winner of the high-stakes race on April 1st will determine whether the Wisconsin Supreme Court remains under a liberal majority or flips to conservative control. The Schimel campaign ad begins and ends with a black and white image of Crawford with her lips closed together. A nearly identical color image from her 2018 run for Dane County Circuit Court shows Crawford with a wide smile on her face. Schimel's campaign admits the image was altered, but not using AI. Failing to disclose any AI usage carries a $1,000 fine.
There was no AI used, so there's no problem or issue under the law. This is a desperate distraction. The explanation deals with, not wanting to have a photo of her smiling as we're talking about her making a bad decision in her past. That's what the thinking was of the people producing the video.
Crawford's campaign releasing a statement saying in part, quote, "We urge the Ethics Commission to thoroughly investigate this matter, what platforms and systems the Schimel campaign used to manipulate this image, and determine if it is a violation of the 2023 Wisconsin Act 123, which requires disclosure of AI manipulated images. Wisconsins deserve better than false advertising using deceptive and artificially altered content," end quote. The governor today also weighing in on the issue. Find out what he said. Plus, we asked Schimel about Elon Musk supporting his campaign. All of this and more tonight at 10 o'clock. Back to you.